What do I even sound like?
I don't know if I could ever listen to a podcast that I was actually on. That would be because I don't like the sound of my speaking voice generally.
I like your speaking voice.
Oh,
It sounds very. See, I was just flirting with you there.
Oh, thank you. Because I could not tell.
Over his head, just like you said.
I had a friend in college who, we ended up becoming best friends, my sophomore or junior year. And by that point, I was out. And at one point in conversation, she was like, "Oh, yeah, I was hitting on you so hard in freshman year." And I was like, "You were?" We did a show together. No conception of it.
In love with movies, in love, in love,
Dani and Nic.
in love with movies. Da da da. Hello,
Movie lovers.
we're doing good.
We're completing each other's sentences.
I'm Dani.
And I'm Nic.
And this is In Love with Movies.
And it sure is. What do we do here, Dani?
We talk about love and what else, Nic?
Movies. Imagine that. It's right in the title.
With a comma. In love, comma, with movies.
We've probably talked about this before, but that was a very intentional thing. I literally consulted a person with a master's degree in English to decide whether that comma articulated the intent that I wanted it to.
Whether it was Oxford or Fuckford.
Fuckford. All right, so we're dropping the F-bombs within
Fuckford,
the first... this is definitely going to be listed as an explicit episode for people who do listen with other children. I don't know, maybe skip.
And we're not alone today, thank goodness. Last couple times we were just talking and I'm sure people were like,
I'm tired of my own voice, so I know other people are.
yeah. So we have a friend today.
Yay, we have friends.
Hi.
If you heard the little chuckles and that hi, we have Ryan Dooley. Wait, can you press the button?
Well, thank you. You like me, you really like me, etc.
Ryan is a... Do you want to go by Ryan or you want to go by Dooley?
Oh, good question.
Oh, man. You know what? Everybody in my life ends up... I'm going to move back a little bit just so that the shining radiance of the sun is not... if anyone's watching on the video, yeah, exactly. And, making my nose look like it's glowing.
We got some Rudolph action going on here.
Right. No, I almost always end up going by Dooley in whatever social circle I enter. So yeah, Dooley's absolutely fine.
Well, that is a fantastic last name.
It is. It is the perfect last name to be going by as a last name.
Is it Irish?
Yes, very. With my confirmation name, my full name is Ryan Patrick Michael Dooley, which is
yeah,
sprouting 4-leaf clovers out of it.
You puke glitter and you poop 4-leaf clovers.
4-leaf clovers, yes. I am a bowl of Lucky Charms made flesh, is what we're saying.
Great. And I know Dooley because we were on Comedy Sports together, right?
Yeah, it was in minor league.
Yeah, we did improv.
If y'all couldn't tell, he's a funny man.
Yeah, no pressure, but be funny.
We've set the expectation for sure, so now I just have to deliver.
And Dooley and I recently reconnected because he was like, LOL, gonna go move to LA. So he did, but we just ran into each other at a wedding for, in fact, the person who remixed our theme song, Paul.
That's right.
Yeah, he's the one who did the little do-do-do-do.
He's the one who made it slap. He's the one who made it slap, let's be honest.
Yeah. And that's what
I had no idea that was him. That is awesome.
Mm-hmm. He's a former guest of our pod.
Danielle's voice. And then but yeah, it was literally just us farting around, joking in the first couple of episodes. And then he took it and made it actual music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now we listen to it every day on our Spotify.
Yeah, it's actually, I just constantly have that, sting going.
It's a real banger. I was going to say, listening to it, when I listened to the Spider-Man 3 episode earlier today to prep for this, I listened to all of my podcasts on 2x speed.
Uh-huh.
So at that speed, it's like a club jam.
Yeah, right? That's what it sounds like to me, because that's how I listen to it.
That's hilarious.
But But like for this one, I'm like, oh, it moves at such a leisurely pace.
Everything's in slow motion.
You were commenting that you hate the sound of your own voice on things like podcast recordings. I'll tell you, the one way I think I'm able to stand it is I listen to it at like 1.5 or 2 times speed, and you now suddenly it doesn't quite sound like you anymore.
Yeah.
Right, you're able to put that extra layer of like distance between it.
Yeah.
Sometimes Nick will be listening to this podcast, and I don't at first clock that it's this podcast, and I find myself laughing, and then I'm like, it's me. I'm just so funny.
So putting Danielle's vanity aside, so we reconnected with you at Paul's wedding, and we wanted to see how life is going for you out in the City of Angels.
Yeah, tell us your whole life story, everything you know about love, film, and then we'll get to the Spiderman part of it all later.
Yeah, of course. Well, I was born on a Wednesday. I was in Chicago for 10 years doing originally musical theater. And I was told that in order to get an agent in Chicago, you needed to take an improv class.
That sounds about right. I'm not surprised to hear that.
And I took the improv class, and I never got the agent, but I fell in love with improv.
And what improv, where did you start, and what did you do?
That would have been improv for actors at Second City.
Okay.
They had a program that it was like half the size of the other improv intro course, because it was like, what upstage and downstage is, how to play a character. But I remember specifically there was one laugh I got in like the second class period that, I mean, I'm sure you guys can relate to this. Like it was like instant morphine straight into my veins. I'm like, oh, this feels incredible. And I want to keep making people make noises like that. Like that, exactly.
I've never made people laugh quite like the two of you do, but just to be really gross and annoy some people, we've recently started getting our son to laugh at us, and I can tell you that has to be a similar feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So, since this is a podcast about love, Dooley, just out of curiosity, let's make sure we've established the baseline. What is your current relationship status as of the time of this recording?
As of the time of this recording, my relationship status is very intentionally single.
Oh.
I was somebody who, for I think a large part of my 20s, I was kind of pursuing relationships as sort of a be-all, end-all, and then, you get older and your priorities change. It's like, no, I'm going to very conscientiously take some me time. So, like, that's what I've been doing lately.
So you're in love with yourself at the moment.
Well, that makes me sound like a narcissist, which
may or may not be true, but
I'm an actor and I'm a writer. I'm pretty sure it's true.
That's funny. So you do have a love for acting, writing, and what brought you out to LA was film, right?
Film, yeah. So keeping on that improv train, sort of in the height of COVID when theater was shut down and there was nothing going on, the Second City had it's on pause right now. They had a sort of 1-year-long film school intensive.
Okay.
And you could go there. They were taking people from all different experience levels and teaching them everything, like writing, directing, sort of the nuts and bolts of producing your own stuff. And it was the middle of COVID and I had nothing better to do. And I was in a job I hated at the time and trying to get out of it. And so I figured, why not? And then I developed a real passionate love for the writing part of it, especially.
Okay.
Directing, being on set, and all of the pressures of that still makes me kind of nervous. So I'm still working to get better at that. But yeah, and I guess it's a podcast, so it's not weird to toot your own horn.
No.
I wrote a screenplay that a couple of my professors said to me, you should consider making a crack at this and submitting this to stuff. And so it's currently on the competition circuit. It's been a finalist a couple of times. We're still waiting to crack that top spot. But but yeah, it's kind of, that script has kind of turned into the car in my garage that like I go to, and I always, buff up and clean up a little thing here or there.
Awesome. How
Yeah.
long is, would you know how long the movie is?
Roughly, because Final Draft, the screenwriting software, screenwriting format roughly breaks down to a page a minute. And it's clocking in at 99 pages right now. So it's about an hour and a half.
Amazing. So truly
Yeah.
a feature film.
Yeah. And hopefully one that, gets in, does what it's supposed to do, and gets out, and doesn't overstay its welcome.
That's amazing. I would ask you to describe it, but we don't want anyone to steal your ideas.
I can give you an elevator pitch of it if you want.
Yes, that's what we want.
I have one of my screenwriting professors gave me the advice. A manager had reached out to me to read it, and he was like, before you send it off, copyright it.
Okay.
Which apparently I didn't know this. You can copyright almost anything for like $20. It's super easy.
I didn't know that either.
But it just gives you something that you can point to and be like, hey, you took this. But no, it's a bittersweet relationship postmortem romantic comedy. So like looking back on a previous relationship between, it's a gay couple, and it's set against the backdrop of the War of the Worlds.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Wait,
amazing.
like the famous sci-fi.
Like the Martians invading, yeah.
I love that so
Thank you.
much. Just even the elevator pitch, I'm like, yeah, green light picture. You know what I mean? If I had the ability. What?
It sounds scary to me.
Yeah, well, she doesn't. Listeners of this podcast know Danielle does not like anything existential, anything dealing with sci-fi, or anything dealing with the idea of aliens.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I did not know that.
That's not
Good
true.
to know.
I really like My Favorite Martian.
That's fair. That's fair. It does technically deal with aliens.
Was that the Christopher Lloyd movie?
Yeah.
Okay. Wanted to make sure I was on the right page with you.
Which, don't get me wrong, it does, but it doesn't meet the other criteria. It doesn't seriously make you consider the nature of human existence, or
No, it just makes me tee-hee-hee.
yeah.
So, Dooley, did you move out to LA because you're like, this is the thing I got, your screenplay, and that's where you've been kind of circling it around? I don't know how any of that works, genuinely.
That is pretty much the long and short of it. It's, honestly, if there was more of the creative scene in Chicago, I would probably still be there because I love Chicago desperately. But yeah, like out here, it's, you're both submitting it to competitions and festivals and seeing what happens there. But then also just like being here, you meet people, and
Sure.
the networking thing is always easier when you're there on the ground. So I've been out here since October of last year.
Yeah. And how, where are you from originally?
I'm from Michigan originally.
Okay. So how does being in LA compare to both Michigan and Chicago, I guess?
I mean, I'm not diagnosed, but I'm like 95% I have ADHD. So cities are good for me because there's a lot of just like incoming stimuli.
Mm-hmm.
So LA is better than Michigan in that. As is Chicago. But this sounds like such a humble brag and douchey thing to say. I never thought that I would ever get like sick and tired of sunshine.
Mm-mm.
But I kind of there is a kind of a feeling at about like your 5th month in LA when you exit the house, it's 80 degrees, there isn't a cloud in the sky, and you're like, yeah, this again.
We have a friend who lives in LA who said that like it's so weird because the weather is pretty much the same year round, but you only know what season it is based on the outfits that people are wearing. Like they rotate. They're like, okay, now I can wear fall because it's September.
And like what are the decorations at the Grove? Have they put up the giant Santa sleigh? Then it's probably December.
That's fair. What is something that you don't like about living in LA that you miss about Chicago?
I mean, it's a cliche, but like Chicago is so walkable.
Mm-hmm.
probably like, I mean, New York is probably the best American walking city, but I feel like Chicago's next to that. And yeah, LA, there are certain neighborhoods that you can sort of walk around. And it's also, I never realized how many houses there are here.
Mm.
Like, you're in the middle of like the second biggest city in the country, and it feels like you're in a suburb. Just because there's all these houses, it just feels that kind of feels alien in a strange way.
I don't like aliens.
Yeah,
We've already established that. So, but speaking about aliens, I'm more interested in the screenplay, and knowing that it's safe because you've copyrighted it, I feel more comfortable discussing. You said that you are also sort of intentionally single. That tells me that there's maybe some painful relationship experiences in your past.
Nick is getting real deep to the trauma, and I'm like, why is LA and Chicago different?
So I'm curious, like, what, if anything, do you feel you could share about, how your screenplay has maybe been informed by your experiences, whether they relate to your choice to, be single right now or not?
That's a good question.
Sure. I mean, definitely, I think, yeah, I mean, both from sort of that phase from my 20s that I was talking about, indeed the character in the screenplay does this too. You're putting a lot of pressure on a relationship to succeed because you've created this sort of pedestal for it in your mind. And like, no relationship can survive that amount of pressure. Like, and so if anything, I think taking your foot off the gas and just allowing yourself to live a little bit allows, like, when a relationship develops, for it to be much more organic and just for it to develop as two people connecting rather than, trying to fit it on a life poster in some weird way. I'm kind of babbling. But,
no, like, it's you had like a plan, or like you had an idea of where you wanted your life to go, and that included a relationship coming and that relationship developing in a certain way. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, Dooley, so correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying you felt like maybe you had put expectations and pressures onto some relationship of your past that you did that sort of metaphorically for where you expected your life to go. And now you've taken that and just made it, instead of a metaphor, it is the literal pressures of like, hey, the world's ending. If we want to do this thing, it's got to be now.
Right. I mean, and some of what informed it too was just, and it wasn't any one relationship. I dated a few, well, I don't want to say a few, a couple of different people over the span of COVID. And so just thinking about like the pressures that external events have on relationships and how they mold those relationships. Like, this is not an original thought for me, but like Titanic, for example, I call it the Jack and Rose effect, because if that ship doesn't hit the iceberg and they just go along their merry way, I give them 3 weeks.
Sure.
But he dies, so he's the love of her life.
Whoa, spoiler alert.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I won't get into like maybe people in our personal lives that may or may not fit that as well. But there is a genuine like, and I'm pretty sure it's been studied by psychology, I think. I know that I think of it being referenced from movies, not actually from my psychology experience, but the movie Speed talks about like, like relationships formed under those kinds of pressured conditions. This is now, I really am going to go nerd out. It probably would be related to the transference hypothesis that has to do with emotional regulation. It's the idea of, they did these experiments where they made people walk across a bridge, and they had a attractive woman interview them for something. And basically, like, long story short, your brain is tricked by the fact that your body is having a physiological response to being on a swaying, dangerous bridge. And it makes you more likely to then presume that there is a romantic attachment to this random stranger who's just asking you basic psychology questions. And they compare that to, like, just on the street as opposed to on the bridge. And I'm forgetting all the details. I don't have my lecture notes in front of me, but that same principle would then apply to Speed, right? Like, we are literally heart pumping, death defying, etc. And then so all of that physiological response is then associated with the love that is in front of you instead, and would be the same as the Jack and Rose effect.
Dang.
I am gonna basically rip up my nerd card live on air. I have never seen Speed.
Me neither.
I know.
But it's not shocking.
I was gonna say, you I'm not surprised by. Dooley, we were like, he pulled it out on me when I made some kind of comment about music in movies, and then another song played while we were at the wedding, and he was like, now what movie is famous for this opening song? And I had not seen Boogie Nights in a very long time, so I didn't connect those dots, but Dooley had it in his head.
I honestly, the reason I remembered it was in film school, one of our directing professors, there was a week where we just talked about oneers, and Boogie Nights opens with this absolutely bonkers tracking shot where it goes like up from a crane outside the club, down. At some point, they detach it off the crane and hand it to a camera guy, and then it turns into a steady cam, and it goes through the door, through the club. It's like 5 minutes long, and it's all set to that song.
Wow.
I've never seen Boogie Nights.
It's a hell of a mic drop way to open a movie, and and not to talk about a movie that like is not the purpose of this episode, but it's just bonkers to think that was only his second movie, and I'm like, and the studio let you spend money on this, and you're like, what, 27? Like,
is this John Travolta is in this movie?
I don't think he's not the lead. I can't remember if he's in it. John
Travolta's not in Boogie. Burt Reynolds, I think, is the older.
You, I think, are probably thinking of Saturday Night Fever.
Yes.
Which is the famous disco.
Yep.
For John Travolta. No, this would be Mark Wahlberg's like serious turn as an actor, and it's all about like the coked out 70s porn era, essentially.
Oh.
So if you've enjoyed the show Minx, I think this would be, a partner to Minx.
Got it. Wow, I'm learning so much. Transference theory. Was that what you said earlier?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called again. I'll be honest, I'm not 100% certain about the names of the theory. The principle is there, and it's.
I mean, and it makes sense because, like, if you're in like dire circumstances that you're terrified about, whatever, you're going to reach out for support to whoever's there, and the weight of the circumstances is going to have a direct effect on like how much emotional energy you put out to need that other person.
Actually, the first time that Nick ever said, well, I think we said it to each other, I love you, was the night that we were at a movie screening. It was Horrible Bosses 2.
Yep.
And something happened at the end of the movie, like in the theater, where they started to say, everybody run. And we thought someone had a gun, and like people were going down an emergency exit, and like it was really, really scary, honestly. I think someone did pull a knife on someone.
I don't know if it was a knife or a fight, but like there was
something
it
happened.
Caused the whole group to push back, and then we had no idea what was happening like around the corner. We just ran.
Yeah, and we went out the emergency exit, and we watched people like get trampled. It was really scary. Yeah. So like that was the night where we both were like, whoa, I do love you. And like it wasn't even super long into our relationship, but it was like that, like you were saying, that world-ending feeling, or like the Titanic effect of like, crap, okay, you got to recognize what's in front of you and and see if it's real or not. And that stuck. That was 10 years ago. So
it's funny. I've never connected those dots, even as we've talked about it before. I guess I think both of us had probably had the thought before then, but it certainly obviously dialed it up to 11 and caused us to share. So
interesting. Well, Dooley, I hope your movie gets made and you make $1 bajillion.
I would just settle for like a simple couple 100,000 or enough that I could like pay rent for a year and not have to do odd jobs. That would be great.
That's fair.
We do have a couple of people like in industry who I think still listen to this podcast who've been friends of the pod. So I don't, maybe
we'll hook you up.
Oh, cool.
Friends?
Maybe somebody will reach out.
Find the Dooley. Find the Irish man.
And you don't have to like just walk around LA shouting, Dooley, where's Dooley? Where's the Irishman? You could, just reach out to us. You know us if you're the people I'm thinking of. And
you'd either find Conan O'Brien or Ryan Dooley.
It's going to be one or the other.
You guys are probably the same height.
It's funny. I frequently at work, I still remember I was like 12 years old and I went on the NBC studio tour. And they used to say that because they would make the desks smaller to make the host look bigger, Conan would always have to sit at the late night desk at like a 90-degree angle, like his knees like off to the side, because he couldn't fit them under. And I have adopted that strategy at every office job I've ever had.
Intentionally, or the world's just not made for tall people?
It's just too uncomfortable otherwise. So.
That is so funny. Okay, I always have to ask people this who live in LA. Have you run into any celebrities?
Oh, sure. Like that, I was kind of surprised how soon it happened. I'll tell this story. I was meeting a friend for coffee, and I walked into a bookshop to kill time, and I was just sort of staring non-specifically into the middle distance, the way you do when like you don't want to close your eyes, but you have nothing to look at. And they just happened to latch on to the first person inside the doorway of this bookshop, who could have been anyone. And then I realized, A, that it was Bob Odenkirk, and B, that he was going to think I was staring at him,
I was gonna say.
which was not what I was doing. And so then I like panicked, darted my head down, and like dashed to the right.
Like literally fled.
yeah, exactly. So I hope he has no memory of that interaction at all.
I bet he gets stared at quite a bit.
Sure. Oh, I can't imagine. That's got to be so weird.
If anything, for people to be like, is that Bob Odenkirk? You know, like that's the thing where when you see people in the wild.
I mean, that was when there was I won't name drop this person. There was somebody who came to Second City to see one of the shows, and he had grown a beard that I was not familiar with. And when I first saw him, I legit was like, is this an uncle I forgot about? Like, I wasn't
You're
sure.
like, I know this person looks familiar.
And then, again, because I have the worst luck with these things, just as he made eye contact with me, I was like, oh shit, it's you.
That is funny.
I've been staring at you for.
Right. I was like, no, I just couldn't think of where I placed you.
That's funny. So how do you think that your improv and comedy background has helped you in film?
I mean, definitely as a writer, it informs you, and like the feeling of taking an idea and not rejecting it and just using it to add on. Like, honestly, the screenplay I was just talking about, I was about maybe 15 pages into it when I saw Everything Everywhere All at Once for the first time, which is like the most yes and movie
Yes,
that
is
has
such a
ever
great way to
been
put it.
made.
Yes,
Hot dog fingers.
Like, hot dog fingers. Malapropism about Ratatouille that's going to become a plot point.
Yeah.
Parallel universes.
Everything but the bagel. Or bagel.
A Marshall.
It is an
The
everything
bagel,
bagel. It is a bagel with literally everything on it. All of existence, everything that could.
A martial arts fight over who gets to shove a butt plug up there.
You're not wrong. It really is like they just, anytime someone had an idea, they said yes, and we're gonna make that work somehow in the movie. It didn't matter how ridiculous it was. They're like, there's a way we can make it fit.
It's like everything but the kitchen sink, and like that is something that I certainly always try to apply to my films, and the stuff that that resonates with me with other filmmakers like George Miller, Sam Raimi, who we're going to talk about, is there are no bad ideas. We're throwing everything at the wall and holding nothing back, and that's something that I'm a repressed Irish Catholic boy, and so
Same.
up until doing improv, I was used to like saying no to myself and my own ideas quite a lot. But yeah, it teaches you to embrace those.
That's awesome.
I love that.
Me too. And with that,
Oh, you want to move on?
should we move on to? I want to hear what he has to say about the movie. Did you have any other questions?
Well, I was going to ask, and this was one that had come into my mind, but perhaps it is not going to apply, and maybe we'll cut this whole section out.
Why not?
But I was wondering, is there any perspective from you being specifically a gay man, if there's any difference between Chicago and LA in terms of the dating scene?
Sure. I mean, in large part, no. I mean, it's both scenes are very app centric.
Okay.
Which I think, just because, especially when you're a gay person, like it removes the mystery factor of, is this person gay or not? And do I have to like incept elements into the conversation to try to ferret out whether this person is on the team or not? Like, oh, so I remember when I came out to my mother. What was it like for you? If you did.
If relevant.
Right. So like, if somebody pops up on the app, okay, at least they're on the team. But yeah, by and large, I mean, it's sort of just I don't know if this is as true in the straight community as it is in the gay community. I feel like there is a sort of millennial generation wide commitment phobia that has been true in both. And like, which isn't to say that, people don't find relationships and find happiness there, but I do sometimes there's a lot more shuffling that goes on.
Sure. And not to nerd out about it again.
Go on.
Transference theory.
So, I just wanted to share like my own ignorance of like, that is so obvious why that would be such a, like, cause I feel like it's a known thing in pop culture or whatever, that within the gay male community, especially, that the apps are like, a really big part of things, and maybe even arguably were a bigger part of things there that then got co-opted by the straight community. And I never once thought about like the very obvious reason for that you just described of, oh, you now know that they're on the team. You don't have to ask yourself that question or do anything ridiculous to ferret it out. Like, duh.
I mean, I had a bit that your listeners can feel free to steal this idea, because I'm probably never going to put it into my stand-up, but it was something to the effect of that, like, Grindr predates Tinder by like 3 years. And so I'm like, oh, so it's a location-based app for the purposes of finding anonymous sex. Is this cultural appropriation?
Like, truly though, like, does it qualify?
Gay culture.
Yeah, and then like I think actually Aziz Ansari's book, and scandal noted on him, but he talked about this and had spoken to sociologists and psychologists that talk about the reasons why that is, and the apps are a big part of feeding into the fact that like option paralysis, decision making. You just feel like you always feel like you don't want to settle down, you don't want to commit, because what if?
Yeah.
So
Nick and I met in real life, and actually I saw him on Tinder, and I swiped whichever
one was not.
The no.
Oh man.
I was like, this guy's
we put that
not
together
my type.
after the fact.
How long had you been dating when you figured that out?
A couple months, I think.
I was gonna say it was definitely within the first year.
Because I think I saw a picture and I was like, wait a minute. Like, he had this picture on his phone. I was like, I've seen this picture before.
I'm pretty sure that was the case. And then we somehow, one of us or both of us, looked at like our histories to like confirm, I think, if I remember correctly.
To be honest, it's because the picture was so dumb. It was like Nick in a cowboy hat, like with his head down. And I was like, that was his first picture. I was like, that's not my guy.
It's funny you mentioned that. That exact same thing happened between me and an ex-boyfriend that I had. We had been together for like a couple of months, and then it turned out we had matched on Tinder, and then we had just gotten distracted because, like you said, option paralysis, and we had never messaged each other back.
Like, there was the connection, the brief hello, and then one or both of you found someone else in the meantime. And
right. Hey, what's up? And then,
That's funny. Maybe this is a pro meeting people in real life propaganda.
I mean, I do genuinely believe there is something to that, but I mean, the focus of, or the benefit of the apps is that it does accelerate some of that experience. Like, the thing is, you're juggling 6, right? So on the apps, you're juggling 6 different people at any given time, and you kind of just start focusing on whichever one's seeming to go somewhere in that moment. Sure. However, there's other factors that could be the reason that it's going somewhere in that moment. Maybe that person was genuinely busy at work for a week and they weren't really, answering things and yada, yada, yada. Versus a in-person meet, it happens slower. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I cut you off earlier, Ryan. What were you going to say?
I'm not sure I remember. But I think I was going to say something about the apps. Oh, well, and similar to what you were saying about like just with option paralysis, like it's just so easy to get distracted by life. So like even if you do have a connection with somebody and you get caught up by life, you get busy, whatever, that it can be like, if you take a week and then you come back to the conversation and like, well, you've lost whatever momentum you were building up, and maybe that's all she wrote.
Yeah.
I am an optimist, I swear, no matter how much this may sound to the contrary.
I am an optimist. I love it. And with that, no, is there anything else, Dooley, that you want to add about like your love of film, your love of comedy, your love of yourself?
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to plug
We're fans
some
of
things?
self-love here.
Yes.
not necessarily my love of myself. I mean, love of film, absolutely. I mean, that's been like film and musical theater have been like the two driving passions in my life since I was 6 years old. And so like it's it is nice that like even when you're intentionally single, like there's something that's something you can always come back to.
Sure.
Like, there's old rep houses here in LA, and now I spend probably too much of my time going to old screenings. And the American Cinematheque, plug for people in LA for an organization I don't work for, is doing a 35 millimeter screening of Jaws on the 4th of July. And like, it's just lovely to have those kinds of experiences. And you can have them by yourself or with somebody else.
That's awesome.
That is fantastic.
Well, next time we're in LA, we'll come crash at your pad.
Oh, please. Yes.
Listen to you just inviting yourself over to this man's
Me and
apartment.
my husband and potentially my baby.
If we have a couch that is the couch I'm sitting on right now is from our roommates who are going to be getting their own place, because they're a couple and they're getting their own spot. And so they will be taking the sectional with them. Otherwise, I would be like, oh, you can crush on this right now. But I don't. Yeah, if we get a couch that's as big as this, I'm rambling again.
All right. Well, with that.
All right. Wait. So Danielle's tried like 3 times now. If you couldn't tell, listeners, she really wants to get to the movie conversation, and you should be just as excited about it.
Yeah, because Dooley, what movie are we talking about again?
We are talking about the masterpiece, Spider-Man 2, directed by Sam Raimi.
I can't wait.
All right. Well, we will therefore see you on the other side, movie lovers.
Goodbye. In love with movies. Da, da, da.
Welcome back, movie lovers.
We're back.
We'll get this down someday, folks. Well, this is the movie portion of the podcast where we're going to go real deep. And if you had listened to the first half of the pod, you know that we have a deep cut film nerd with us. So we're going to have a very introspective, interesting conversation about our movie, Spider-Man 2 by Sam Raimi. We're apparently just going in reverse. We've done Spider-Man 3 is where we started last year with Comic Book Couples Counseling. We're doing Spider-Man 2 with Dooley. And you know what, movie lovers? If you know somebody who seems good on mic and is just absolutely in love or has a special connection to the first Spider-Man movie, please by all means connect us, because then we will have completed the trilogy in reverse, and that will be perfect.
Great. And then we'll start from the third what's the little guy's name?
Tom Holland.
Thank you. The third little guy.
The little guy. I love that you knew where she was going with that, Dooley. I had absolutely no clue.
he is shorter, so
yeah. He's smaller.
Than all of them. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, Nick, do you want to give us some opening credits?
I would love to give some opening credits.
The little guy's not in this one.
No, the little guy is not in this one. Sorry, we also just watched not too long ago Madam Web, and they seem to have played it up as if that is supposed to be taking place perhaps in the little guy Tom Holland's universe, because of the time frame. Anyway, it just made me think of like, oh god, that too. Anyway, so Spider-Man 2 came out in 2004. So this is like right after, I think the first one came out in 2001, so that makes a lot of sense. Oh god, that hurts.
Oh my god.
That hurts. That's actually, you know what? That feels weirdly like one of those movies where I'm like, sure, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But anyway, directed by Sam Raimi. We've talked about him a lot. Sam Raimi is probably most famous for the Evil Dead movies, but he also was brought in to do the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness movie, if listeners are MCU fans. There were a number of writers on this particular movie, including the originals, Stan Lee, who, created the character, everything like that, but the only other sort of like screenplay or screen story, because I'm not sure there was like weird credits on this, and maybe you can enlighten me, Dooley. Like there was like screenplay, screen credit, screen story. Like I'm not used to seeing. I'm usually seeing like just story credit, screenplay, and those being maybe two different things, but not like there's. I don't know. There was 4 different ways they did it. Tell me, enlighten me.
The writing process on this movie is bizarre.
Okay.
And frankly, the fact that it ended up working out as well as it did, I mean, part of, and not again to talk too much about a movie you've already discussed, but I think part of the reason why 3 fell out the way it did was they thought that they could get away with just repeating the writing and development process that they had on this movie without realizing that they kind of just got lucky here.
Yeah.
And you can't build the plane in midair twice in a row and expect to get away with it. But like so the studio had the first thing that was announced was the release date. This was one of the first of those movies where like even before people were cast, like there was this will they won't they about whether Maguire was going to come back. And they had a bunch of people submit drafts of varying plot lines. I think Doc Ock was pretty much a constant throughout.
Okay.
But different takes on him. And then Raimi it was like 3 or 4 different drafts of the screenplay with Alvin Sargent, who was this dramatic screenwriter. Like he won an Oscar for Ordinary People, which is this like quiet domestic drama about a kid who goes to therapy after a death in his family. And so he's writing a Spider-Man movie, sure. Although, like, part of my thesis for why this movie works is because he brings that energy and that understanding of character to this movie. But yeah, it was basically Sargent and Raimi sifting through all of the different drafts that people had submitted and taking elements they liked from each and like Frankensteining them together.
That is fascinating. And that you're right. If that is the process that they attempted, it shows in Spider-Man 3.
Yes.
It does not show that much in here, which is very bizarre and, as you said, interesting and fascinating to think about, like, how that worked. It also is funny to me that it's like, cool, so that happened and it worked really well for Spider-Man 2. Then they saw it not work for Spider-Man 3. And then other movie studios and Sony since then has also just continued to, especially the last 10 or 15 years, repeat that mistake over and over and over again. How many movies have we had announced with their release dates and then they just fall off the slate completely? Entire universes have been announced. Anyway. The one writer that did was somebody who'd gotten credit as part of it is Miles Millar, I think is probably actually how he pronounces it. I'm thinking of the comic book writer Millar, but he is one of the co-creators, the 2 people who created the show Smallville. I'm a big fan of the show Smallville, so I just think it's Spider-Man, Smallville, Superman. They're kind of right in the comic book vein. It makes sense, but thank you for enlightening us on all of that.
Oh, sure.
I love these details. I did not realize Tobey Maguire was not necessarily going to be a part of it or was ever in question. So Tobey Maguire is one of the other stars of this. Obviously, he's from the other Spider-Man movies. Listeners, you might know him most recently from like The Great Gatsby with Leonardo DiCaprio. He played what's that character's name? Kerouac or something like that?
Nick Carraway, yeah.
Yeah, Carraway. There you go. Something was near there. Kirsten Dunst, who very recently was in the movie Civil War by A24. I don't think she'd really been in much since then. You might have, if you haven't seen her in Wimbledon, you would enjoy.
I have seen her.
Okay, in Wimbledon.
Yep.
I feel like Wimbledon was the early 2000s version of what's the Zendaya film that just came out?
Challengers?
Challengers, right? So it's like this pseudo sex drama,
but more lighthearted and.
Wimbledon was, yes. But
Yeah.
there was an element, if I remember, of like the competition and then also, sex, and I think there was some cheating involved. And
that is something I've never thought of, that like every decade has its horny tennis movie.
right?
That's funny.
And then also Danielle, and anybody who's a fan like her would probably know her from Bring It On. Alfred Molina he's like just this phenomenal character actor. He's one of those people who I feel like most people don't know his name, but he's one of those people who's probably been in a movie that you loved and you're like, oh, that guy.
Who does he play?
That's Doc Ock.
Oh, okay.
See, point taken.
To tie it into something we talked about before, he has a 1-scene performance in Boogie Nights and basically walks away with the movie.
Interesting.
I did not remember his scene, but when I was looking up credits to try to be like, okay, what other movies might people know him from? I wrote down Boogie Nights because we had talked about it. And he also was in the Da Vinci Code. And then I was trying to figure out, like, what's the first standout role for me? And this is, like, silly and deep cut, but he was the main villain in a Mel Gibson vehicle called Maverick back in the day. And he was, like, the antithesis. He was the antagonist for that movie. Probably, I think, if I remember correctly, in brownface. So, you know.
Yikes.
Dated things from the 2000s and 90s. But
Yikes.
James Franco, we've got James Franco,
Obviously.
Obviously your Pineapple Express is your 127 hours. And J.K. Simmons, in my opinion, is just like, I mean, so much of a star that he's the one and only person who has now made it into the
All
larger
the
Marvel
universes,
universe because he just had to.
Yeah.
More so than the only other exception for me might be Robert Downey Jr. playing Tony Stark, of an actor who is just, this is the character that I was reading in comics when I was 10 years old, just
Yes.
made flesh.
Yes.
Like, so good.
Yeah, he embodies it so well. And they do such a great job with his like makeup too, the way they did his hair and then his mustache. Like, it truly is like, yes, like you said, this is him from the page.
And he's in all 3 versions of Spider-Man.
I don't think he's in the Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Man.
I've never seen that.
They're interesting movies. There's like, they don't quite, you know, certainly not in the way that this movie does. I don't feel like they come together, but like there's interesting stuff to them. But yeah, they don't really touch the Daily Bugle in that one at all.
Yeah, yeah. I remember it not really being much of a thing, which is arguably one of my complaints about that movie. But we're not talking about that one. We're talking about this one right here. So, and with that though, the opening credits done, we have a special treat for listeners because I know this is some people's absolute favorite part of the podcast. No pressure whatsoever.
Time for Danny's Dingle.
Spider-Man. Again. Pizza deliverer? You fired. Man, Spidey's down on his luck. Peter Parker, his web stopped webbing. Can't make it to a play. Just life, no good. Aunt May, no money. Apartment, no rent. Is Spider-Man worth it? Is it worth it to be Spider-Man? No, I'm going to go back to college. But then, Professor Smart Scientist Octo Octavius Fusion.
It's most fun to just watch
Fission.
letters squirm.
Fission, fusion. Wow.
Tritium.
Tritium! We must save the world. Because Doc Ock, the arms, bad guy. A wedding? Runaway bride? Was it you all along, Toby? The end.
I was like, do you have more after that? That's like literally the final shot of the film.
I'm gonna be honest. Sometimes I watch these movies. We watched this, I told you, like 2 nights ago. I can't remember a dang thing. There's a lot of things that go into my brain these days.
Listeners may also enjoy the How Did This Get Made podcast, and Danielle is definitely the June Diane Rayfield of
Hell
ours.
Yeah. So, love story, Nick.
Yeah. So I'll go first quickly, actually, just because like I knew Tritium. Part of my love stories, this was just, you know, one of those movies that was out my junior year or whatever of high school. I'm sure I went to see it probably opening weekend, possibly with a group of friends, and, you know, enjoyed it thereafter. The reason I say Tritium is in my love stories because it was just another, you know, movie because I went to a lot of movies back then. But I can remember, so this is also very, very nerdy, deep nerdy stuff for me. I was in the summer between my sophomore and junior years of high school. I was an intern in a neuroscience lab where the first ever paycheck I got was for watching rat porn, as my friends used to call it, because it was literally, it was rats fucking, and you know,
Wow.
I was recording ultrasonic vocalizations and ejaculations.
Okay,
Anyway, the guy who was my like grad student mentor at that job, he and I would nerd out about literally everything, and we would talk about plans for the future, talk about just general science stuff. And he was the one who enlightened me to the fact that like the whole plot point in this movie of Tritium being something that's this obtainable substance, and it's so hard to get, and he has to like specifically go back to Harry Osborn to get it for him because it's so hard to find anywhere, and only the resources of Oscorp, yada 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 yada. Tritium is literally just 3 hydrogen atoms together, a molecule of 3 hydrogen atoms, and apparently you could like create it with any basic chemistry set and a little bit of some smashing things together. It's not that hard, apparently.
Oh, it's real?
Tritium is a real thing. It literally refers to just 3 hydrogen atoms.
And incredibly common, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah. It can occur like randomly. It might be a little harder to create, but it's not like impossible by any means.
So your love story is that you saw it when it came out. Jeez. He's like, I'll go real quick, and then 6 minutes later. I'll give you my love story real quick. Wait, can I ask, when did the first Spider-Man come out?
First Spider-Man's 2002.
Okay. So I have, on this podcast, I talk about this a lot. My dad died when I was 8, and so there's a lot of, like, boy movies, quote, that I just, like, didn't see because I didn't have a boy influence in my life. So I don't know if I ever saw this movie until Nick rewatched all the Spider-Man before Far From Home came out. Mm-hmm. And I was walking back and forth in the living room, and I was like, I don't know if I've ever seen this. And then I watched part of it, and now here we are. I watched the whole thing.
Okay, so I would like to articulate that as much as you just made fun of me for my long version of a short love story, it wasn't as long, but you said, here, let me do it really quick. Your short version should have been, I watched it 2 nights ago, period.
Ryan, what is your love story with this movie, and why did you pick it?
I mean, I picked it. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's in my Letterboxd top 4. Like,
I love it.
This is going to sound like a hot take. Like, to me, it is literally on level with like Casablanca and The Godfather, except The Godfather doesn't make me cry every time I watch it, and this does.
All right, this is a great place to start.
I watched it. I mean, in some of it, I was a Spider-Man dork and I was a Batman dork growing up. And I had this giant book. It was a coffee table book of the entire history of the Spider-Man comic up until the time it got published, which is probably 2000-ish. So I'm like 10 in this story. And so that had hooked me on the character. And so I was very excited. And so I saw this probably opening day. I remember it being in northern Michigan at the Petoskey Cinema because my family would take a family reunion trip every year to northern Michigan around the 4th of July. Big Irish Catholic family, 14 grandkids. And I don't remember which of my cousins were at the movie with us, but I think several of us were, and my folks as well. And like, yeah, I remember exiting the theater just on cloud 9, in part because like I didn't realize as a kid going in that like they were going to let Lucy catch the football and that they were going to get Peter and Mary Jane together, and it's just such a fist pump moment when that happens. So yeah, no, I mean we'll get into the nuts and bolts, but I'm like massively obsessed with this movie.
I love that.
I love that, and I love your point about MJ and Peter for sure.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. We haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, not to start at the end or anything. But
Okay, I do want to say, and I pointed this out. I took notes. I have a lot of notes on this movie, surprisingly. But I knew, Dooley, that you would have all the answers to all the things. So,
oh gosh,
the opening credits to this is like cartoony.
Uh-huh.
But there's a picture or whatever moving Toby Maguire with his shirt off, like super jacked.
Uh-huh.
That was jarring to me. And like also irrelevant because you never see him like that. Like, thoughts?
There's one. I do find it interesting that for such a supposedly straight male dominated fan space as comic book superheroes, it does seem like each one, it's like, all right, we've got to get him to take his shirt off at least once in the movie. Because even this one, there's one when he's changing for the play.
Okay.
It's not quite as
gratuitous?
obvious or I was going to use the word gratuitous, as the first one. So I just love though that this movie lovers, if anyone who knows the sequence knows what she's talking about, and Dooley, please enlighten us any more you have to add. But it clearly shows Danielle doesn't realize that was an intentional sequence recapping the first movie with clips literally from the first movie.
It's their way of like jogging the audience's memory of, because it's sort of like all of the big, and that's him. There's a scene, and you want to talk about something that's off-putting that I'll get to. He goes to bed and he's all shrimpy, and then he wakes up and he's jacked. And what's really off-putting, so Kirsten Dunst and Toby Maguire dated while shooting the first one. They had broken up by the time they did two.
Yeah.
But on the audio commentary from the first movie, when he gets undressed and he's little shrimpy Toby, Dunst makes some comment on the commentary track like, "That's not Toby's real body." And I'm like, and then he wakes up and he's jacked. She goes, "That's Toby's real body." And I'm like,
nice.
Okay.
That was probably not necessary, but you know.
Right. It's like, well, thank you for telling us that you have firsthand knowledge.
Oh, she been there. I have at work, there's a security guard that works where I work, and he calls me MJ all the time because he tells me I look like Kirsten Dunst.
Yep.
Huh, I can see it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You may have also been a redhead when you first started working there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would do it.
I've been through redhead phases.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay. I definitely didn't clock that was a retelling of the last Spider-Man.
And that is actually one of my first notes, though, is like, I love that tool. And I think it's a tool that has been used in other things. And I don't know that it was used as effectively as it was here. Like, they made it look comic booky while at the same time having it be exact scenes from the first. And it like you said, gives the highlights to kind of refresh without having to sort of retell the whole story.
So I don't remember the first one, clearly.
Obviously.
All I remember is the upside down kiss. Obviously.
Which
iconic.
gets a very pointed callback in this movie.
Yeah. Obviously.
So I was confused. Like, why is he a pizza delivery guy? Because he's a photographer.
So this to me, and Dooley, I do want to hear your thoughts on this, but it is my second note actually, was I loved, and still love, always will love this entire pizza delivery sequence. Okay, so for a couple things. One, in my opinion, something that the other movies, the Tom Holland included, and this is one of the things I was alluding to about the Andrew Garfield movies, get wrong, in my opinion. Like, one of the quintessential things about Peter Parker is he's broke. Like, that is always his biggest villain. He is always broke. And he is constantly trying to, like, make ends meet. It is that fact that always seems to, and that, like, you know, he's a smart guy. He should be able to, like, just go make a bunch of money and be totally fine. Or hold down a normal job because he's a good dude. He's responsible. But it's then Spider-Man that always prevents him from sort of figuring that out.
Yeah,
so
there's
that
always a disturbance with you.
Exactly. And so that is what that whole sequence to me is about. And it is just, like, very much Peter Parker put upon, like, he's trying so hard. You can tell he's been struggling. And yet, you know, then they managed to add levity to it. Like, just, I literally was like, okay, so I love that actor who plays his boss, who I think was, like, in Daily Show as a correspondent.
Yeah, he was a correspondent, Asif Manvi.
Yes, I couldn't remember his name. Thank you. And so I thought he crushes. I love the sign of him swinging through. I love him, like, coming out of a closet, clearly on, like, the top floor of some office building, and this woman who accepts the pizza from him and then tells him I'm not paying for it has zero questions about why her pizza delivery man didn't come from an elevator. She watches him come out of, like, the broom closet.
And he's like,
disheveled.
the mop keeps
just, like,
falling over.
What? So I love everything
remember
about it.
thinking about it on this watch of, especially like when he goes into the alley and he comes out with the boxes and the guy's like, "Hey, he stole that guy's pizza." That, like, it's almost like how the Muggles in Harry Potter will pretzel their minds out of all recognition before they admit that magic exists.
Sure.
Like,
yep.
They're just they refuse to see it.
Yeah, because there's obviously a scene later where he has his full face out.
Yeah.
And people are like, Spider who? I don't know.
Well, not to get too far ahead, because that is another important scene that I'm sure we will discuss. But, like, the beauty of that is that they are all actively choosing.
Yes.
And not to, obviously. But the only other thing about the pizza scene is, like, if you've ever had a pizza that got delivered by someone who, like, had it in their front seat and their seat, like, was just a bucket seat with too much of a, like, lean to it. Think about how that hot pizza comes to you, and then imagine what the, like, pizza would have actually been like after having been swung all around.
The cheese is all going to be on the roof of the box.
Yeah.
Well, and one piece was taken out and then put back in.
Yes.
By the guy in the roof.
And like, did he manage to get all of the webbing off of that crust before he put it back on there?
It is a very good opening sequence. I like it.
Yeah. And I think it perfectly sets up like who Peter is, what the types of things are that he deals with, and you know that he's Spider-Man, and that makes it hard for him.
Yeah. And that we are going to spend this movie like cartoonishly kicking him when he's down.
Yes.
I also think it's like, I don't remember this in most of the movies that I watch, but like I wrote down that the music for the pizza delivery scene is like the same epic music that like when the Avengers are fighting someone.
Right.
And I think that just really kind of sets up the tone of this movie too, of like, this is a comic book movie. He is a hero, but also he's a joke.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
It's much more street level. Like, I mean, and it's funny that they only made a plot point of this in the Tom Holland movies when they're kind of not this at all, but they make the point of saying that he's a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Like, he's ground level superhero as opposed to like, saving the planet and stuff.
And
yeah.
I like these movies way better just in general because I talk about this all the time, but like the new superhero movies and especially Marvel in the past like 5-10 years, everything has to be giant and epic and fighty, punchy. And there's not a ton of that in this movie. It's more like, this is the character. And that's the stuff I love, is like, you want to know who Spider-Man is, what his backstory is, why he is the way he is, and then like, give him a little bad guy to fight. And this bad guy, he fought with his words.
You're not wrong.
Essentially.
Yeah, I think that's, of the Tom Holland ones, the best one, in my humble opinion, is the first one, because it is much more ground level. It is way more of the story is about him trying to navigate high school, and then, like, that includes, navigating having a girlfriend or getting a girlfriend, and the brilliance of then having his actual sort of, fighty villain tied into that is just such a brilliant move in terms of screenwriting to add character to it, which they do here as well. Like, he ends up using his words to defeat Doc Ock because he's had a relationship with him as Peter Parker.
Yes. And I mean, bringing up the Tom Holland movies, it's that thing that like, I mean, standard disclaimers apply about the creator of this show, but that like Buffy the Vampire Slayer would do so well, where it was like, we're going to take a real life problem or dilemma that people have, and then you put superhero trappings on top of it to serve as the metaphor, which is kind of what Spider-Man 2 does too, because it's like, I mean, again, comparing it to how in 3 everything's all over the map, in this movie everything is in service of the love story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, I think the biggest takeaway from this movie I got was that it's hard. It's hard out here for a pimp. It's hard to be. Sorry, I don't know why my brain went there. It is. He's like, he has this internal struggle of like, would he be better off if he wasn't Spider-Man? And the reason I like this movie is because they don't hit you over the head with that by like having some exposition or some dialogue that's like, I don't know if I like this. It's just like, shit keeps happening to him, and it's getting in the way of his real life. And he's like, man, I wish I could have real life. I wish I could love MJ. So yeah, I guess that is the love part of it all. But like, he can't even like go to class. He keeps showing up late to class because he's got to fight crime. So I really like that, like the subtle conflict rather than hitting you over the head with like, here's what's happening.
And like, whenever possible, I mean, Raimi is just such a good visual storyteller across the board, but like he's doing this visually and through gags, through demonstrations. And I love the sort of subtle jujitsu he pulls during that absolute genius raindrops keep falling on my head montage. I remember watching that in the theater and like jumping out of my chair because I recognized the song and being like, oh my God, this is genius. It is like he lets him get what he wants, and he allows him to look bad doing it so that he is showing us as the audience that this is bad, but Peter has no idea how ridiculous he looks.
Yeah. Except for, okay, speaking of that, when he's not Spider-Man anymore, he decides to. And okay, question. This is just like a superhero question. Does he not become Spider-Man just because he kind of wills it away? Like they were saying that he's kind of starting to lose his powers because he's not believing in himself. Is that what's happening?
So I have a note about this because I remember I hated this particular plot point when it first came out. I was like, I think it's so dumb that, and it makes no sense to me why he would lose his, sci-fi
Like
spider
why does
powers.
web stop coming out?
Just because essentially performance anxiety, right? Like there's probably a sex stroke here, about him not being able to get his webs to shoot anymore. But apparently, and I can't remember who I had this conversation with, but it's someone somewhere along the line, either in like a podcast that is deeper into nerd stuff than me, or someone I talked to said yes, there was at least one storyline in the comics. See, like my Spider-Man was the Spider-Man of the 90s TV show. He made his web shooters. I like that. I like the Spider-Man Peter Parker, who's brilliant to do that. But the original Spider-Man, like literally just like shot them out of his wrists somehow, and they just were there. And there was a storyline that is actually used visually, speaking about him being an amazing visual storyteller, the scene where he kind of like throws it in the garbage can and walks down the alley away from his suit. That is a like part issue of Amazing Spider-Man, apparently, where exactly this happens. He decides to put away the suit and walk away from it, and the reason part of that happens is like he's conflicted about what to do with his life, and then yes, his powers just start disappearing because he feels conflicted and his heart's like not committed to it. Hate that, love that. To answer your question, I think yes, it was in the comics originally.
Dang. Dooley, anything to add to that?
No, you summed it up very well.
Sorry.
But like, again, even as like, being a kid who was obsessed with this, like just seeing the image of that cover, like verbatim recreated in the film, it demonstrates also just how much reverence Raimi had for the character.
Yes.
I mean, I remember watching I can't remember if it's the first or second, but there's an interview where Dunst is like, seriously, Sam is so obsessed with Spider-Man. If you get him started, he will not stop talking about it. and like you can feel that in the movie that like he genuinely cares in a way that other comic book movies that may be getting made now that I won't name maybe don't have that same sense of passion behind it.
Maybe have still another panel of writers, but those writers are people who are thinking that they can just make anything fit into a comic book story because that's what's getting made these days, and they're just taking general applications of storytelling and making it fit in a comic book story, even though they may or may not have never read a single issue of the comic.
So, as a person who's never read a single issue of the comic, I will say though, like I didn't know any of this, like that there's an exact like frame for frame of the comic book, but also to me it doesn't matter. It's still like so enjoyable and so like I'm easy to follow and very like it's captured me to be like, this is Spider-Man, this is his life.
Yeah I mean, and I think that's the beauty of it. And it must have been like that there was these bits and pieces of scenes, and they like you said, they Frankenstein together. Like you can kind of tell that there must have been somebody who wrote a much more serious somber version, and then somebody who wrote a much more comical version, and then I don't know if somebody wrote a horror version or if that's just Sam Raimi's influence, but it's certainly, there are scenes that are like straight up the scariest PG-13 horror scene you have ever seen.
that hospital scene is straight out of Evil Dead.
Yeah.
Like right down to, I mean, talking about image recreations, the shot where the doctor gets pulled under the table, but he raises up the chainsaw and the chainsaw goes up. I'm pretty sure that's like just quoting Evil Dead 2.
He's literally quoting his own movies.
Well, because Bruce Campbell is famous for having been in those movies, and at some point in those movies, Bruce Campbell literally loses his arm, and it is instead replaced with a chainsaw that he uses to fight zombies, essentially.
So
Deadites.
Sorry, go on.
I was just gonna ask: is there a lot of humor in those movies as well, or are they not supposed to be funny?
I would say yes. It's a sick kind of humor. I mean, I was thinking about how to describe this earlier today, and you both are comedy people. So, like, Evil Dead 2 is live action Itchy and Scratchy.
Okay.
It's like a cartoon with like anatomically appropriate amounts of blood and guts.
I have never seen Evil Dead, and I don't think I want to based on your description.
Fair.
I can't remember if I've ever seen the first one, because the first one, if I remember correctly, is like a bit more horror. It still definitely has like it's like imagine, you know, this is a horror movie with comedy beats. And then, like, Evil Dead 2, as I gather, is, like, you know, where just things go full camp. And it is, like, a comedy movie with horror beats.
like Nick brought up the arm chopping off. Like, his hand is trying to kill him. So he severs the hand, places it under a bucket. And to hold down a bucket, he puts a book on top of it. The book is A Farewell to Arms. That is the tone of that movie.
That is funny. I made a note though for this movie. Like, I really like the humor in this movie. It just works for me. It's like dumb, smart humor. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, and it's all coming out of character. Like I just saw they put this out in theaters again a couple months ago. I don't know why, but I just went to see it. And like any of Jonah's lines about not wanting to pay for the wedding were just still crushing.
Yeah, I think my favorite is that last one at the very end when like the guy his son John gets a Dear John letter while you know, on the altar, and he's literally like, call so and so, and like he names her, so that's even better. And then his wife's like, the caterer, and tell her not to open the caviar. Like that is just like. He's already thinking about like, oh shit, I gotta save money.
Or his wife calls and has like lost her checkbook, and he goes, "Good.
Thanks for the good news." That's literally what he said. Thanks for the good news.
Man, but it's also balanced out with so much like genuine heart as well. Yeah. Like any scene that. Like the ending of this movie makes me cry, and then just about any scene with Rosemary Harris as Aunt May, just she's so good.
I have a hot take. I wrote May's acting. Yikes.
Oh wow.
I think there was only one scene. The first one, it was just like overacting.
Okay, now you're backpedaling because you brought this up to me on a walk yesterday, and I said I can see where you're coming from. It's a little bit of a obvious delivery in that one particular scene, and then you were like, no, like truly through the whole movie, and I was just like, how dare you?
I can't remember the one specific scene that I wrote this down somewhere early on, but I think it was just like the first scene where she throws the birthday party, and she's like laid out on the table, and she's like, I beat her.
Oh, when she passes out, yeah.
That's right, yeah, and it was that because I remember we were talking about her like crying and insisting that he'd take her last $20, even though, you know, which is also just very much like that is Aunt May's character, and then yeah. So,
all right, well,
I think I'm with you, Dooley, that she's a treasure.
No, the scene that still devastates me is the one where where Peter is honest to her about what happened with Uncle Ben. And just one of those choices that I only noticed this time watching it, that like so smartly, Raimi does not cut back to her for that entire monologue. So he is going on and you have no idea what her reaction is. And then they cut back to her and she just has that like deer in the head, and then the hand just pulls away,
and she walks away and closes the door. Yeah,
man,
devastating.
Yeah.
Which that though leads to another part. The scene where she's like packing up or having a yard sale, whichever one it was. What do you think, Dooley? Because I've heard people saying on both sides of this. Does that conversation indicate she knows?
I think
I very much think so. Okay. And like I don't think they necessarily tip their hand, but you could make the argument that it happens in the scene at the bank because she does hear Spider-Man talk to her.
Okay.
And like theoretically, like she's his mom, she can probably recognize the sound of his voice. But this also gets into like comics nerdery. That I saw in my beloved coffee table book that I keep talking about. There was an arc in the 80s where they had May was dying. And you know, it's comics, people die and come back, you know, like a bus line. But she knew she was dying, and so she asks Peter to take her to the top of the Empire State Building because that's where her and Ben's first date was. And then when she gets him up there, she tells him that she's known the whole time.
Oh.
It's so sweet.
Oh. I was thinking a lot about when May dies in the new Spider-Man movies and how that was such a, like, quote, devastating death, and I felt nothing.
Yeah.
Ooh.
That's another hot take. We may have already. Did we talk about that on an episode? Maybe.
I don't know.
I know that's a hot take, but I truly, and yeah, we were also not in the ideal movie going experience for that particular film, but I felt like nothing like that. Yeah, I was like, I should, given my history with the character, given my history with like this Aunt May, for example, and like how that transference of emotions, like I should be like literally feeling like my heart has been ripped out of my chest and put on the floor in front of me. And when I was watching that film originally, all I was being is like, I see that that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah. So I will say this is my Aunt May. I remember her as always as my Aunt May. So I'll give her that. She overacts a little bit. Just saying.
Yeah, but I would argue that might be intentional. It is a Sam Raimi movie. There is a lot of camp and a lot of overacting that takes place in certain pieces.
It's a comic book movie.
Yes.
I get it. So Dr. Octavius.
Otto Octavius. Yep.
Otto Octavius.
What about him?
He's fine.
Ah!
Dooley's gonna come at me.
You're lucky this is recorded and he's all the way in LA and we're on the screens.
Is he your favorite villain? How do you feel about him as a villain?
I think this portrayal of the character is like different than I've seen, because he's normally not a sympathetic guy. He's normally kind of in like the Snidely Whiplash, I'm gonna be evil to be evil, mwahaha. And but they kind of Mr. Freeze him up here in like giving him the sympathetic backstory and the dead wife. And
that he kind of, it's his fault that she died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I really like it for the character, and it's a good contrast too from Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin in the first movie, who is just, I'm gonna cackle into the night just for kicks.
Yeah, the rich guy villain.
Yeah.
Right.
And is like truly straight up insane versus
Otto, where it's like it's him, but it's also not him. It's the arms, and they have that whole dimension to it.
When they first show the arms, though, like that is scary. I just like my body like got tense.
When you like the fact that they made them like their own characters and the fact that they leaned into the whole AI of it all, I thought that was brilliant. I also, just the look of it and that first opening reveal of, I wrote down multiple times in here in different ways, essentially like, man, I miss the days when CGI was good, and I miss like the days when we mixed it in with practical effects. And the reason I'm thinking about it now is I just had a note that was like, God, the reveal of those arms is gorgeous.
It's so good. and they do that Jurassic Park thing where they're, at times, I think, basically alternating CG puppet with each cut. And so it blurs together in your mind and you just buy that it's real.
I did.
Yeah. Like today when we were watching it the other day, I was like, okay, so the scene where he tears off the like vault, that looked very obviously shiny and video gamey. There are moments when they are fighting where they've let it go too long as like CG. But the same thing you're saying is like, then there's other scenes where I think that they've cut back to a close up. And then, you have a quick, couple second shot of it CG, but your brain like washes that away for you. And the only time it gets noticeable is when it's like, okay, we have this prolonged 30-second sequence or whatever, where you've got a Doc Ock fighting a Spider-Man. And the Spider-Man still looks good in my opinion, but the Doc Ock, there's the uncanny valley happening. So
totally, there's some stuff in the clock tower fight that has maybe aged a little bit. It's not quite Rubber Neville Longbottom going up on his broom in Sorcerer's Stone, which is like my low watermark for early 2000s CGI. But like but then like you said, there's some stuff that's held up fantastic.
Yeah, and I would also argue that even the stuff that didn't hold up, like I'm like, it doesn't hold up in the sense that it looks obviously CG, but there's things that were made 2 years ago that look just as obviously CG. And that to me is the difference, is like, that was the peak of what they could do, and they bothered to do their absolute best and mix it with practical as well. Like, there's a scene with the car. There's a car that like goes rolling, and then it's caught physically, and they mix together where clearly nobody was in the room where the car was rolling, but then like there is a scene where they are like in front of a physical car, and like imagine it's wild. Anyway,
how does his inhibitor chip? Do the arms rip it off his neck?
I think the idea is that in the initial explosion, it gets fried.
Yes.
It's just like the explosion blows it up.
Got it. Yeah.
It was a very quick scene, but it was like he turned around to, I think, protect his wife, or said to like, don't worry, everyone stay calm, or something like that. And there was one of those flashes that then like fried the chip, and that's where everything went bad.
Also, why does he wear sunglasses? What happened to his eyes?
I think the sunglasses just look cool.
Yeah, that is totally them. Like, if you look at a picture of like OG Doc Ock from the comics, they're trying to visually represent that in a modern day sensibility. But it works because it does look cool, and like the Morpheus glasses. And then he has that one scene where they bring in the arm comes and like, to be like this smaller thing and takes off the sunglasses. That was brilliant.
And then, I mean, my favorite is like later on in that shot when one of them lights his cigar.
Yes.
It's just awesome.
Yeah, it was very like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Just, you know what I'm saying? Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah.
Because I wrote down, he does say, he's like, I'm not a criminal. They're like, rob a bank, get money. I'm not a criminal. But then he keeps doing these criminal acts, and he can't control it. So, okay, I take back my meh. I like him. He's good. Joel McHale is in this movie.
Yes, he is.
That was like shocking. I didn't expect that at all. He was pretty funny too.
He was. But I mean, Joel McHale is always funny.
Yeah.
There are so many like early 2000s character actors like sprinkled in, like Daniel Day Kim from Lost, I'm pretty sure is a lab tech.
Oh, really?
In the initial fusion reaction scene, this is more on my side of the fence, but Hal Sparks from Queer as Folk is the guy with the dog who gets into the elevator with him when he's coming down.
That's funny.
My brain did not connect him with Queer as Folk, although that makes sense. My brain did connect him with being like one of those early 2000s everywhere comics. Like, I think they did like the, I Love the 70s or the 80s or whatever, and he was always on those too. Yeah.
Nice. I also made a note. This goes back to the horror element.
Yeah.
This movie has so much screaming. And almost every scene there's screaming. And it's mostly a woman screaming, but like the hospital scene, horrifying, so much screaming. But like even when he's just like walking about town, he pulls the cafe, the front of the cafe open, screaming.
Yeah.
Ladies screaming.
Preferably straight into the camera.
Yes.
Like that happens a lot.
Yeah, that they don't have that in a lot of other comic book movies.
It's like, you can give you can take the director out of the B movie, but you can't always take the B movie out of the director.
It's funny.
Anything stand out to you in any of the other stuff that we've been talking about, Dooley? I want to give you a chance to.
Yeah, sorry, I have
gush
so many
some more.
notes.
I have notes too.
Oh no, me too. This is the it doesn't show up. On the audio medium, let me show you something. But no, I took a notes app and it's just filled with stuff. But I mean, really, for me, the thing that keeps me coming back to this movie is just how compellingly that love story is drawn between him and Dunst. And it's also kind of nuts that they had broken up by this point, because I feel like they have more chemistry in this movie than they did in the first one when they were actually dating. But yeah, and like to the point, like the ending, straight up, like it's up there for me with like the ending of Casablanca, where like every line is a freaking banger. Like, I've always been standing in your doorway. The one that, if I haven't started crying by that point, always gets me is, isn't it about time somebody saved your life?
That is sweet.
It's just, and it's caring about these characters and what they feel and their human experience. And that, and all of the action and the Doc Ock of it all is really well done and awesome. But like that's the heart of it. And something that sets it apart from so many, not just comic book movies, but I think movies in general being made right now, that it is so achingly earnest
Sure.
and wears its heart on its sleeve without a trace of irony, which is, I was thinking about this watching the movie. There's that monologue that Ke Kwan has in Everything Everywhere, where about like how he chooses to be an optimist, and that it is actually quite a brave choice, despite all of the evidence coming into your life to the contrary, and that in some ways it's the easy choice to make a comic book movie that's cynical, that looks down on institutions, that's going to be really dark and gritty. And yes, The Dark Knight is my second favorite superhero movie, but it is second to this for that reason. Because I just love how much it feels.
Oh, MJ at one point though, I did write down she's a bit of a floozy when she said, "Kiss me." She wants to truly kiss in public, and then they like zoom in on her giant ass engagement ring. I'm like, this girl.
Well, I mean, I did think that was, obviously a choice, but I mean, okay. I do not have quite the same love for their performances, for the love story, for as much of their articulation. However, I do see lots of like things in there, and I want to articulate a couple of pieces that I love that you make me think of, Dooley. Back to our earlier conversation, but I want to make sure, like, that's because she's just kissed her fiance
Upside down, sideways, kind of, yeah.
And remember that later in the movie, she also says, "I think I've always known."
Yes.
So she clearly
just don't do it in an alley. You're in New York, like.
Oh, okay. So it's okay if she cheats on her fiance, so long as she hides it.
So long as no one sees it.
It was in broad daylight. So I don't know.
No, I think it's pretty obvious that in that moment she's trying to convince him to kiss her because she's convinced that she's going to know when he kisses her, and then she's going to break up with her fiance.
No, I understood the motivation.
Okay, I just want to make sure. But back to like this whole like him being the sex joke of it all, of him losing his powers, and the idea that he's sort of being told that he believes he cannot share his whole self with this woman because he is afraid both for her well-being, his well-being. He is afraid for how it will harm their ability to have the relationship that they have had or could have. And there is, I think, a very, as you said, genuine human truth to that. It is something we've talked about, like the fear of sharing your full true self, and that there is always risk associated with that. I mean, we've had this conversation about ourselves. We had this conversation about like how we want to teach our son to love, and the idea that like it's very easy to be guarded and not to, at times in our lives we maybe for our own well-being need to be guarded, like Dooley is shared that he is right now. But part of the reason you have to be guarded is because the only way to truly love is to be vulnerable, is to be able to be at a place where you share your whole self, fully knowing that there is risks associated with it. Now, in this case, it's risks of, evil people doing evil things. In real life, it's just usually the risk of like that person could reject you, or that person could love you and you could lose them for completely other reasons. Like that is always the risk, but it is the only thing that makes love worth it in the first place. And so that is the message of the movie you're saying. It's like you have to share your full true self, and that's why he does at the end, and that's why they're together.
I mean, and similar to what you were saying, like, the secret identity is such a good metaphor for that, for like that part of yourself that you're holding on to. And again, stuff that hit me on this rewatch that haven't hit me the other 20 times I've seen this. Like the play she's performing in is The Importance of Being Earnest, which is a play about double lives and people doing things under assumed names and lying about who they are.
Oh, I never caught that.
I clocked the name of the play, did not know enough about this. I'm not well versed enough.
You can cut this out of the podcast if it feels irrelevant. It's this guy who's like a dandy rich guy who has created this name of Ernest that he can go to the city and live the life that he wants to live away from his betrothed And then like identities get swapped. At one point, somebody says Ernest is the brother. But anyway, yeah, it's all secret identities and lies.
Interesting.
Again,
So then,
more intellectual layers. Very smart man, Sam Raimi.
So is that why you guys were talking about this earlier? Kind of. That's why the scene where he's saving the people on the train is so important because he doesn't have his mask on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's his true vulnerability.
Yeah, and I would even argue that perhaps that's part of what allows him to trust that maybe he'll be okay. Like he allowed his vulnerability there with a larger group of people, and it was rewarded.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was sweet. They tried to protect him, and then Doc Ock was like, "Nah, bro, I got these tentacles, though."
That was a great moment. Like, you have this beautiful hero moment for the civilians. They're all like, "You got to go through me, and me, and me, and me," and then it goes to him, and he's just like, "Okay,
all right." That's actually quite easy.
Yeah, I think that scene was one of my favorites, and we were kind of pointing this out, like Toby Maguire. That's a hard scene to act where you're in the front of a train trying to stop it, but in real life he's not on the front of a train.
No, he's on a soundstage in front of a green screen.
Yeah, so good for him for making it seem like truly so believable.
Yeah, because there are moments that he looks like he's, struggling on the crapper, and then there's other moments where, like, the very end. I mean, it's...
I am now going to think about that every time I watch this movie, so thank you.
You're welcome. No, but like that is interspersed with, there was another moment where it was like right at the very end, like as it's ending and he's reached the like he's succeeded essentially. It's coming to the final thing, and I said to you, like, it's actually a close up of his face. He's not having to strain as much, so it doesn't look as ridiculous. And there's just like this look of determination in his eyes right there at that last bit, and that's really good acting.
I think that scene also shows the age of this movie, though, because I was like, if this took place now, the amount of people who would still take pictures with their phones.
Whip out their cell phone. I didn't even think about that, actually. Yeah, you're not wrong.
Hashtag Spider-Man revealed.
Yeah. Sell it to TMZ.
So what you're saying is no one can trust anyone in our deep state of surveillance that we live in now versus 2004. All right, noted.
Correct. So this ends by, ironically, an octopus can't get wet. Right? The river kills him.
I didn't think about that.
You're not wrong.
You're right.
Yeah, he's like, the only way to stop me is to drown me. And that's a tough moment, too, because actually at the beginning, he does say, he's like, I'd be better off at the bottom of the river. And then that becomes the solution to getting rid of him, which is wild. And he kind of takes himself out.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
Yeah. He makes the sacrifice play.
Which is... Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, I was saying, like, that, completes his redemption arc.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He gets to die a hero because that's the thing, is, like, who makes the sacrifice is the hero.
And then we see James Franco finds Daddy's secret closet.
Which, that would have been a post-credit scene had this existed in the modern era. Because that's what it is. It's like, here's this little tease to set up what we're probably planning for the next movie.
Speaking of, did you notice, it's my favorite Easter egg in the entire movie, the scene after that, which is the wedding scene. Did you notice anything fun about Franco's outfit?
No, nothing's coming to mind.
Green?
Oh, in the wedding, he's wearing a green bow tie.
Oh, that is fantastic. That's such a good nod.
So he
now
is
that he's flipped.
That is brilliant. I really like that a lot. No, the one other Easter egg, though, although it's an Easter egg flung into the future, you may have noticed this, Dooley, when you watched the most recent movie No Way Home, that the Spider-Man will come back. There's a callback to his my back after having said I'm back. So I thought that was cool.
So related to that is the will they won't they Toby of it all. Toby had messed up his back doing Seabiscuit, which he did in between Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2. And that's what his agent said. I guess in the guise of, we just want to make sure that that the movie will be safe for him. And the studio interpreted that as, he's trying to get more money and is trying to back out of the project. Mm-hmm. And so they made all this noise about, like, they were going to hire Jake Gyllenhaal, and who ironically
eventually he goes into a Spider-Man movie.
Yeah. Well, and it was funny because he was dating Kirsten Dunst at the time.
Oh, I
So
didn't-
it's whoever Dunst's boyfriend is gonna be Spider-Man.
Wow.
But and so the my back line is a sort of affectionate elbow at Toby for that.
I did not know that. That makes it even more brilliant that they like it.
Yeah.
That was in the movie for that reason, and then
Yeah.
that it got carried forward.
I just had one note at the end where they're like in love, swinging around with the webs. What are the webs attached to?
Like especially at the very end
Where
when
he's
he's
just,
like,
going through
basically
the
just
air?
flying straight up at him.
Right.
Fake.
There's a little suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, there's always a skyscraper somewhere when you're in New York, right? Like,
There's something to clutch onto. A tree somewhere.
Over the river. And then my last note of this whole thing is that hearing sirens must be so exhausting for Spider-Man. Because the end scene, he's like, the cops gotta go. And he lives in New York.
yeah. I mean, and
They
now you
never
understand
stop.
why he can never go to class, why he can't hold down a job, because he feels because of his great power, he feels a great responsibility to answer literally every single siren that he hears.
Poor guy.
Man.
Dooley, I want you to get to end on whatever further thoughts you have or your last notes that you haven't got to touch on. My one note that I did still want to share, just because it was comical to me.
Yeah.
As if on cue, when there's the moment for Kirsten Dunst, Mary Jane, sharing that she's engaged, our son literally shit himself at that line. Like, it was... She's like, Peter, I'm engaged. And his eyes go... So that was just, I thought that was funny. That was really good.
He's smart.
A great illustration of the way that Peter's feeling at that moment, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But please
mean-
give us something more insightful to end on.
I mean, it's just, I keep coming back to the screenplay. Like, Roger Ebert was kind of banging the drum to try to get this a best adapted screenplay nomination in 2004. It didn't work. But still, like, the relationships are so clean. The character work is so well done. And even, that you have a movie that is essentially you punishing your protagonist for 2 hours in ways great and small, that it then all builds up to this catharsis so that when he finally gets what he wants, it's such a fist-pumping moment. It's just so well crafted. It holds up so well. To me, this is all
No,
just
I
my
agree.
thoughts on it. And I guess I'll go out on the final shot. I do love just that moment of uncertainty of MJ watching him go, of like, okay, well, now what? I've done the big dramatic thing. I mean, Raimi says in the commentary, like, he was directly calling out to the ending of The Graduate, like, where it's, you flee your wedding, you make the big, but now what's left? And that is actually where it leads quite nicely into 3, where it's like, okay, now you've had the movie love of building up the idolization of a romance in your mind, and then now you actually have to go and be in a relationship with another person.
And take all of their baggage with them.
Yep, exactly.
And he's got a lot of baggage.
Yeah. Yeah, and I couldn't say that more beautifully, so I'm not even going to try. Lord knows I've done it in the past.
Thank
That's
you.
fantastic. Let's get to our then wrapping up with our love heart ratings and our would you renew your vows. So it holds up so well. So I think I'm gonna give it a 4.25 out of 5 hearts. So Dooley and listeners it's been a while since I had to repeat this, so I forgot. The heart ratings is supposed to be a 0 to 5 hearts of a relatively objective, how good you think this film is, how many stars would you give it, etc. And then a, would you renew your vows is like much more subjective. Will you want to watch this movie at some point in the future? And that one is much easier for me. Like, yes, I will watch this movie again multiple times before I die. So.
How many hearts would I give it? 4.5 out of 5. I liked it. Would I watch it again? Yeah, I would. I hope Hayden watches it. I think it's a really good, easy to follow, but like compelling comic book movie. And there's a lot of them out there these days. and I won't rewatch all of them. So yeah, I really did enjoy it. So thanks for making us watch this.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad you liked it. Yeah. I mean, for me, I alluded to it before, like, this is still probably my favorite comic book movie that I've ever seen. So, this is one of my Letterboxd top 4. So for me, it's a 5-er.
Good.
And, I usually make a point of watching this movie every, year or two. So, yeah, definitely renewing my vows on this one.
Amazing. Well,
I love that.
With that, I keep saying that. With
With that.
And just like that. Dooley, is there anything that you'd like to plug or have people follow you?
Sure. I am definitely, I've been increasingly doing stand-up more and more, so that's going to be starting to find its way to my social media stuff. If you are interested in anything that I have to say, whether it be about movies or musical theater or my other special interest, theme parks, you can give me a follow at Dooley Noted 16. That's DOOLEYNOTED 16 on Instagram, and the same at Dooley Noted 9090 on Twitter.
X.
I still call it the Sears Tower. There's no way I'm thinking.
That's fair. Nick, anything you want to plug?
If you are someone who might know people in the industry, Dooley sounds like he's got a really friggin' awesome script to maybe go look at, so I'll plug that. Otherwise, you can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Nic Loves Movies. That's NICLUV, love, Nic Loves Movies. And Dani, where can they find you?
Find
or anything
me
else to plug? At
Dani Miami 4. Most content now is baby content. But
Aww.
I'm getting back into comedy sports soon. So TBD.
No date, just TBD?
No, yeah.
Comedy sports. All right. Well, we're big fans of comedy sports here on this podcast, so go follow them as well.
Malarkey Theater.
Yes, at Malarkey Theater. And then you can follow us, our podcast, at In Love with Movies. That's the letter N, Love with Movies, all spelled out. And that's on pretty much every social. We're more prominent on some versus others. We're still waiting to see which one of these things shakes out, if it will ever be the case. But all right, with that, I love you, Dani.
I love you, Nick.
And we love you, Dooley.
Oh, I love you guys too.
And we love you too, movie lovers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
She's pissed because I took her goodbye.
Bye-bye. In love with movies. Da-da-da. Like, none of this is shocking. He's got giant thighs because I do. He's got horrible gas because we both do.
Right.
And he pukes glitter.
I mean, but let's be honest. That last one is literally something you probably dreamt of, is your child being able to puke glitter.
I did. I wanted a little glittery boy. We did it!